Okay, let's just make sure this is working. Okay, good morning. Welcome to this webinar on introducing the SonicWall Secure SD-WAN. I'm Alex Michael. I'm one of the SEs here in the UK, covering UK and Ireland, and we're here doing this with the guys at NetThreat. So get comfortable, and we will crack on. Let's have a look. There we go. Okay, so let's just talk about what SD-WAN is. So for those of you who don't already know, for those of you who haven't done your homework prior to this, software-defined wide area networks. So what is network? What is SD-WAN about? It's kind of a buzzword at the moment. It's certainly something that us here at SonicWall are busy with. Something that we get asked about a lot. It's all about optimizing your network, the management and the operation of your network, and not being limited to the constraints of connectivity. So I mean, it varies how it's useful. It typically what you've got on screen here is different types of network setups. And the topology that they might use and their layout. So this might be relevant to you. It might not be. It sort of tends. It's covering at the top there. You see, there's some quite large enterprise SonicWalls there. There's a data center with an NSA 9650, one of our larger boxes. And there's lots of servers being hosted there. Or in this case, virtual firewalls of SonicWall virtual firewalls. By all means, reach out if there's something that you are interested in. And then you've got the corporate HQ with a very large 12K, one of the larger of our boxes. High density, lots of users, lots of traffic, and they're all trying to access their resources in the cloud. And I'm sure that you will know about that, and probably have some experience of resources being in the cloud. You've got AWS as your Office 365, Salesforce, that sort of thing. Being able to access those resources are paramount. Okay, and the reliability on your internet connectivity, on the internet connection is very high. If that goes down, then then you've got issues. Okay, and then what you have sometimes, depending on the size of your organization, is remote branch offices. Now, in this scenario that we've got here, and there's another slide later on with an SD-WAN version, as it were, you've got an MPLS connection. These are direct lines linked from the HQ to those remote branch offices, although there's no reason why those connections aren't going to the data center. Each of those sites are smaller, handful of users, smaller firewalls, as you can see there. There's our TZ600 power over Ethernet with a wireless access point, all the range being flashed up on the screen there. And the idea is that the MPLS is quite expensive. Certainly they've certainly been around for a long time, but we're limited to that use because it's the dependable point to point. You don't want any sort of contention, and you kind of need that dedicated connectivity, and despite the cost. Okay, so that's a distributed enterprise network. I'm having trouble changing my screen. There we go. 1 second. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so just to cover that in a bit more detail, a typical enterprise branch office, and again, this might be related to your business. I guess if you're large enough, invariably you're going to have multiple offices, and a typical branch office, banking, retail, manufacturing. As I stated, that there's an MPLS private link, limited bandwidth, because they are expensive. I could name you, in my career, multiple business types. Not even necessarily banking, retail, manufacturing that had this sort of setup, and they have a dedicated backhaul to the HQ. The applications are stored at the HQ, so they were very dependent on that sort of thing. There's obviously the Salesforce and apps like Box. That's becoming more popular, where people are using storage of files in the cloud. I mean, I'm sure if I asked you to raise, if I could see you raise all your hands who's uses a Dropbox account or a Google Drive or stuff like that, I'm pretty sure everyone does. You know, whether it's just for your personal photos or for some documents, you know, the encrypted state of it, you know, the security of it, that, you know, the fact that the files will be safe if anything should happen. I think that's very popular. But again, it's accessibility, and you know, from these enterprise branches, you know, if they've got this link to this backhaul link to HQ, they won't necessarily have connection to the internet. It's not something that I tend to recommend, even with a backhaul. Having an internet breakout, you know, with an ADSL, it's always recommended. It's almost redundancy. And then SD-WAN, we're sort of creeping into SD-WAN territory with that sort of logic. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. So, what are the challenges? Excuse me. So it's the unpredictable application performance. So let's say your internet connection takes a dip. You've got your one internet line, whether it's contended or you've got 50 users and one user is doing all of his Netflix. Oh, that's probably a bad example. Let's say he's downloading his Windows update and it kills the line. Ultimately, unless you're doing some sort of clever bandwidth management, you know, it's gonna make it difficult. And, you know, as a techie or as a support desk, you know, you're going to be confronted with the notion that you know, it's slow. We cannot access. It's slow to get our resources in the cloud or our applications, whether it's a DC or whether it's in the cloud. And the increased bandwidth costs, you know, depending on the location of where you are, the idea that you can get a faster internet speed, you know, without paying extra for it. There are exceptions to it. I tend to find that a lot of my education customers, you know, they get gifted higher internet speeds for whatever reason that may be. You know, it's offset by government, that sort of thing. But yeah, it stands to reason that the faster line, you know, the higher the costs, and these are just costs that need to be absorbed somewhere. And then a complex deployment and management. So again, going back to the topology discussion, the problem with having a site with internet breakout and then a backhaul link, it's, you know, there's multiple routes there. You know, it adds complexity to troubleshooting. You know, for those who aren't worried about these sort of networks day in, day out, you know, it's gonna be an issue, something that you have to look at, and you have to manage different interfaces and then connectivities. Okay, and you may have to set up the dynamic routing protocols where, you know, you know, the choice between the backhaul link and the internet connection may be needed, and it's quite a lot of config. All right. So, how do you solve them? And for those who haven't already clocked on, the idea of getting all the branches connected together, a sort of hub and spoke or a mesh deployment, you know, you need to be able to do that in a cost-effective manner. You can't just sort of throw out links to every single site and not expect it to do that. So one idea is to to use low-cost public internet services to replace those expensive MPLS backhaul connections. Now, well, conversely to what I just said, it means that you're now going back to sort of a contented line, maybe something that's a bit less reliable. But the idea is being able to use multiple lines in an SD-WAN fashion. So if you could replace the MPLS, you're already looking at cost savings. And this is coming up quite often with some of my distributed customer sites. They know that the most expensive part of their connectivity are those MPLSs. Okay. Excuse me while I just have a quick drink. So, you know, the idea is, sorry, just looking at point 3 there, the idea is to spin up the new apps as and when needed. So we live in an age where it's all quite different. If you will cast your minds back to, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and what you were using and what you were not using, I think you'd be pretty surprised about the sort of tools that are available. Obviously, there's some that have been established for a while now. You know, your Salesforce, to use an example, but you know, the environment is changing all the time. I fully expect my job to be very different a year from now, based on the apps that are available. And as consumers, you know, the demand for new apps and devices to make life a lot easier is just unprecedented. It's something that we have to deal with. Okay, increased uptime. So if there are some certainties, it's that you're going to lose connectivity. It's just very difficult to maintain 100% connectivity on your lines. Now with SonicWall, for those of you who know us well, you know that we have a HA solution. Perhaps you'll buy a firewall with a HA unit. So if one firewall dies, as much as we like to think that we're very reliable and all the rest of it, there are things that can go wrong. It's undeniable. You can have a power spike, you can have a hardware issue, you could have a theft or whatever. Having two devices means that your connectivity is still maintained. But at some point, there's going to be a point of failure. It's about offsetting these risks. With intelligent load sharing, which is where SD-WAN comes in, because we are ultimately grouping connectivity lines together, just like the HA is redundancy for hardware units. SD-WAN is HA for lines. Okay, so it's very important that we appreciate that you could start with SD-WAN. You could start bunching these lines together, and then we will do the work for you of making sure that your connectivity is going unimpeded. Okay, and that way we can deliver predictable application performance, make them continually available. So all those lines that are going out, we will intelligently work out for you using SD-WAN which line is more efficient. So, to use a very poor analogy, perhaps you're jumping in your car, you're about to head out, a couple of hours drive away. You might take the motorway. That does tend to be the smart idea. But you don't know if there's traffic. If you check the news and there's a traffic jam or there's an accident, maybe you'll take that A road or that B road to get there. So it will take longer to get there, but it'll be the best of the worst situation, let's say. And that's how SD-WAN works. You can make out, you can tell the device that assess the jitter, assess the latency, and then choose a more efficient way. So we're taking that away from you. There's no need for human intervention. We will just do that for you. Excuse me. Okay, and more importantly, and it goes without saying, they need to secure the network from threats. So the thing about SD-WAN, it's all well and good having these multiple lines, but it amounts to nothing if you can't provide the same security on those lines like you are doing currently with your single internet line or your MPLS backhaul. So it's very important that you're able to secure each and every one of those connections. Okay, and then just at the bottom there, managing them all via your single pane of glass. This is just because you want this flexibility and uptime redundancy doesn't mean you have to make your configuration life more difficult. Yes, there are settings that you need to set, and there are things that you need to check on, but by no means does it have to be complicated. All right, so I think it's fairly obvious now what the benefits of SD-WAN is and where it's come from. We're not the only ones that are doing this. People are realizing that in a day and age where cost cutting is vital, the unpredictability of business. I think we all know what we're talking about. We don't know what the future holds, especially here in the UK. It stands to reason that cost saving will be something that will be appealing to the business owners. Okay, so we're looking at reduced costs. You need something that's fast and agile, something that's easy to set up. You don't want to throw a lot of man hours, a lot of engineering time at it. There's a lot of stuff going on. Deterministic app performance. We talked about this, being able to pick the best line to go through. Real-time visibility, operational efficiency, and security. Okay, so we've covered all of those, but yeah, I think we see the benefits of an SD-WAN solution. Okay, right. So what are we doing to do this? So as you probably would have guessed by now, it would have been a bit upsetting if at the end of all that I said, yeah, SonicWall can't actually do this, but here we are, we can. For those of you familiar with SonicWall, we've just recently released 6.5.3. It's our next firmware in the series for all across the range. SD-WAN is now available on that itself. I toyed with the idea of running a demo, but I think for the sake of for the presentation, we'll keep that. But needless to say, there is a lot of information online on our knowledge base, and perhaps we'll get a link sent out with the guys at NetThreat on where you can read up on it. But 6.5.3, you absolutely will see information about that in the manual. And because it's so straightforward, it is essentially adding lines, adding tick boxes. And yeah, for those of you familiar with the late versions of SonicWall, if you've spotted your little magnifying glass on the right hand side of the control screen, you will be able to type in SD-WAN there, and it'll tell you all the places that can be configured. Okay, so again, replace the MPLS with lower cost internet access. So in theory, if you've got your SonicWall already in your network and you've got your pesky expensive MPLS and you want to move to your internet line, perhaps a couple of them, maybe 3 of them, you're now armed and ready to do this. Okay, you're probably asking what that means for your VPNs. Well, SD-WAN will overlay your existing VPN connections. So, with a small bit of configuration, there's no reason why your VPNs can be maintained through those multiple internet lines. You will have to create new tunnels, but absolutely, and absolutely can maintain those. And then if you're going to have a hub and spoke environment over the internet, then you will need your internet, your VPN, in order to encrypt and secure that connection. Okay, and again, we're going over a few points here, but just to tick those boxes, it means that you can be predictable, and we can make sure that you get the best performance out of those lines using the SonicWall and its algorithms therein. Increase the agility to support your cloud application. So you can amend it. It's not something that you configure and walk away. Perhaps it's something that you can even stick another line on should you need it. Add more bulk to that. Something that just would not have been practical before. Whilst maintaining your security with the SonicWall security. And one of the nice things about recent SonicWall advances, and we've definitely done a webinar on this before in the past, is our new zero-touch deployment. So if you are rolling out remote sites, one of the nice things about the agility and the speed of your deployment is being able to send out your firewall boxes once you've registered them, and they'll add themselves automatically to your capture security sensor. I believe that was the last session we did together. And your capture security sensor, once they're in there, then you can go ahead and configure remotely. There's no reason why you have to visit sites. So you can set up your SD-WAN once your lines are plugged in. That's a very simple part of doing it. And there's no separate license cost. This is included in your security bundle firmware. License that you have with your firewall. Okay, so we're not charging additional hidden costs. This is all part of that. I consider this to be a feature that as a security vendor we should have this as standard, and we are. Okay. So now, here's that updated diagram with SD-WAN in play. Okay, there's some consistencies and similarities there. So the data center still exists, the application still exists. But if you have a look at your branch offices, we've been the MPLS. Those green and blue lines there, that represents low-cost Ethernet lines. So what's interesting there, what I haven't mentioned yet, there might be two ADSLs, there might be a cable modem, but they also can be a 3G or 4G dongle. So imagine that. So maybe if you don't have you might be saying, well, it's all well and good you saying this, but we don't have the capacity to get an ADSL where we are here in the sticks, or in the upper high in a mountain or somewhere. So you can with the SonicWall, as you probably already know, you can connect a 3G or 4G dongle to the USB. Have that have your connection based on all that. So you can have your connectivity going to 3G and 4G. So yes, you'll need a phone signal and so on, a cell signal. But there you go. So just some nice features about our SD-WAN there. So it's NSS Labs validated. You'll be pleased to know. We already talked about zero touch. So we could do WAN load balancing. So here, if you have a 5 meg line and the 10 meg line, just throwing it out there, there's no reason why essentially you could say, well, I have a 15 meg line now. Whereas before we always had failover in the SonicWall technology. That meant it was one or the other. You either use the 5 meg or the 10 meg. You could not share between the two. Now you can essentially say that you've got traffic over both those lines. Okay, and that's the dynamic path selection that we mentioned. Making sure that you have the best possible experience. Okay, secured AES 256 VPN. So just because you're using multiple lines doesn't mean that you're just throwing your data to the walls. It's there. It's secure. You still have application control and visibility. As I'm constantly having to remind you and the rest of my customers, if you have your SonicWall and you're not having application visibility enabled and application control turned on, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. It's a fundamental feature of a next generation firewall, being aware of the application identification. And if you're not haven't got it on, maybe you have got it on, you haven't checked in a while. Have a look at the monitor screen and just see what applications are going through your network. Very important. Okay, and all of these sites can be controlled from your central location, and we've talked about that with CSC. All right, we're just gonna summarize what we said. So fast, agile, simple deployment and management. That's with the zero touch and our CSE. If you haven't seen it, I would ask you to go to the NetThreat website. I'm assuming it's there. Maybe you could reach out to them, and they can share with you the webinar that we've talked about CSC in the past. And I mean, look, if you have just to cover that off very quickly, if you have a My SonicWall account, then you can go to cloud.sonicwall.com, and then you have access to CSE. Period. You know, you have, yes, there are parts that are chargeable, but there's no reason why you can't add your firewalls to the Cloud Security Center. You know, simplify experience, manage it. You know, have your configs backed up in the cloud, that sort of thing. Multipath selection and high availability. So there's your WAN load balancing. So, you know, you can start planning your strategy. What lines can you get? Perhaps your generic line cable provider, owned by your multimillionaires. I think we know who we mean. Maybe they're doing a deal for a nice 20 meg line. You can get that in. It doesn't mean you have to replace the existing one. You're just stacking it on top. You know, or maybe that you've had a good deal with your 3G, 4G dongle, USB, or maybe even just a 4G router, something that you can click into your network with an RJ45 cable. There's no reason why you can't add that to your SD-WAN. You know, it's just a case of creating those groups. Okay, deterministic application performance, and if you just look at the second point there, latency, jitter, and link usage. So you can decide which ones you want to observe for. So maybe one of those lines are unreliable. I used to live in a flat where, despite it being in the middle of London, had very poor internet connection. It was you know, it's a 10% traffic loss. It's an absolute pain, especially when you're doing this job and you're working from home often. You know, back then obviously I didn't have this technology, but you know, being able to work out which line has the most latency and then avoiding it when you can, you know, it's invaluable. You know, gone will be those complaints from your users saying, you know, why is this line slow? It's always slow, and so on. Put the technology in to make sure that they're given the best possible experience. Okay. Good. Proven security. So again, this is just us waving the flag of SonicWall security. NSS Labs certified. We've had our capture sandboxing session. I believe that was a good 6 months and plus back now, maybe a year ago. That's still there. With our RTDMI engine, the one where we're looking for those day zero attacks, application control. I've already said that. Intrusion prevention, anti-malware. These are all tools that remain and are available with SD-WAN. It's not like we're giving you this new feature and sacrificing others. You are able to secure those multiple lines. Okay, and there's application visualization just there in the final slide. Okay. The final point, I should say. So let's just talk about the market, and you know, this bit is maybe less techy, but I think it's important to discuss this. You're gonna have to take my word for it if you haven't already heard about it. If it's not me first introducing you to this technology, then one of our competitors will be, or one of the pure play out there. So we'll be talking about it. It is all the rage. You know, the cost saving ability of those lines, MPLS. And the technology of MPLS, they've gone on days when they have, I'm not going to say monopoly, but that's probably unfair. But you know, some people just felt the need that they had to use their MPLS connections. Well, that's no longer needed anymore. Whether your business is retail, that sort of model. Retail is a good example because of the the number of branches dotted around, branches that disappear and spring up at a moment's notice. Again, especially now with this uncertainty, it's something that has to be expected. You need to be able to have the technology to jump on that, and then, or it's just a distributed enterprise. I'm guessing for the audience that we have here, that's probably more like you. You've got your HQ, you've got your small offices, 1 or 2 man bands in business centers. You know, there's your that's the people who will sort of be interested in our SD-WAN. Okay, so I mean, I sort of ummed and ahed about including this slide, but just to talk about you know, the competitive nature. So we are Firewall, which is doing SD-WAN, having SD-WAN features and technology. Okay, there are what we call pure play technology vendors out there. Now, for those of you who use the content filter on the SonicWall, it's a very similar sort of conversation there. So I often talk to customers who have dedicated content filters on their network. You know, I'm just not to spring out any vendor and competitors' names. They might have a box that's sat on the network. It's acting as a proxy. They forward the traffic to that does their work, and then it forwards the traffic out to their internet. But lo and behold, you have a SonicWall in your perimeter that also does content filter. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to do it twice? that's viable. Maybe that will secure your network even more. But if we're being realistic, what you're going to do, you're going to have your unified solution. You're going to have the firewall that does have content filtering rather than the box that's dedicated. Unless there's a very specific feature set and business case for doing that, why would you not just decommission the on-LAN proxy, recover that support cost, reduce the complexity to your network, and then do it that way? It's exactly the same premise with SD-WAN. Okay, why would you have a dedicated SD-WAN appliance sat there? Just that's the bottom left one. The bottom right one here and the top one there. Those are SD-WAN appliances, Silver Peaks, the Ciscos, the Velo Clouds. You're going to have that with a next-gen firewall because, they're not really doing both. And maybe if you're a certain size, you can afford to do that, and that's fine. But surely what you're interested in is that square at the bottom left there where you have firewall appliances with dedicated SD-WAN capabilities, because the complexity is minimal. Once the technology is in place, you know what you want, you've got multiple lines, bang, there it goes. You can do that, and then you can adjust the jitter perhaps or add additional lines. And those are the players there on the bottom left. So it's us, it's Fortinet, it's Barracuda, it's Cisco, Meraki. Certainly along with all the other competitors, there's a realization that they have to keep up with this functionality. Okay, yeah. So that's that there. I'll just do that. So what makes us stronger? Well, we've talked about the deployment and manage of our cloud security center. That makes it an attractive function. It's just the ease of deployment. Any techie can wrap their head around it. It's not like you're going to have to do network planning. I mean, I used to spend a lot of time in my contracted days, turning up on a customer site, having a look at their network diagram, being given a brief of how to make it more secure or faster, and I'll turn the network on its head and then bang, it's weekend work, it's nighttime work, you're making a lot of changes. It can be disruptive. The mindset has to change of the users and so on. An SD-WAN and the ease of deployment with with the options of SD-WAN and the central management server, the CSC, that just speeds it up. Yeah, and so there's less of this disruption. There's that you can get your time to money, as it were, can be improved. Okay, so that's basically it. It's a very straightforward topic, I find, and I know I went over the same points multiple times, but I think it was important to stress. It seems to me that if you're not thinking about SD-WAN and you're there with your expensive backhaul line, then you're doing yourself an injustice, for complexity and cost. I'm not being disingenuous when I tell you that this comes up in every meeting I'm in nowadays. It was almost like a tap overnight from sort of late summer last year. Customers were saying, "Look, I've heard about this SD-WAN. I can see why it appeals to me and to management. Is this something that you can implement?" It's something that you should at the very least consider. And if you're already a SonicWall customer, which I believe a lot of you are, have a look. Get your firewall up to 653. Have a look at our knowledge base article. And consider it. And you know what? You can do it in a test environment. You can connect your second line, enable your SD-WAN, and just set it for some applications, and then see the improvement for yourself. Minimal disruption. Give yourself that peace of mind, that redundancy, and it means if there are any techies listening, you can go on your holiday and not have to worry about these, the idea of getting a call because some lines have gone down and so on, because the redundancy would have kicked it, just like it would with your HA solution. Okay, I've rambled for long enough. So that's the end of this webinar. I think we're about done. If there are any questions, the guys at NetThreat will be more than happy to follow up and help you out. And obviously you have access to myself. Happy to sort of explain in detail. It's just a very high level session to introduce you to SD-WAN. So thanks for your time. I hope this was useful, and see you all again soon for the next. Watch this space for the next topic, and we will speak then. Thank you very much. Bye bye.